Welcome to the Protagonist Pub. My name is Tammy, and this is where characters gather. Happy Monday, y'all. It is the 19th of August, and I had an amazing reading week. I have brewed an entire pot of coffee and grabbed myself a nice large mug of it, and get yourself something to drink, settle in, because I've got some books to talk about. Oh, do I have books to talk about? The good, the bad, the what did I just read? I have it all. We do the spectrum this week. So, if you're a returning viewer, if you're a new viewer, if you're a new subscriber, I hope you find something to read. I hope you find something that sparks your interest. And if you hear of a book that sounds interesting, I hope you go pick up that author. So, without further ado or housekeeping, let's dive into the fun. That was my reading week last week. First up, we're going to talk about my one DNF. Now, I say my one DNF because there were easily 4 other books that could have or should have been DNFs for me, but they're finishes, and we will get there. So first, let's talk about the DNF. That would be Till Death Do Us Part by Laurie Elizabeth Flynn. This published on Tuesday of last week. This was a Goodreads win for me. It is now an unhaul. Despite its gorgeous cover and its intriguing back blurb, I DNF this book in the mid 30 page range because of content. There was a fade to black open door scene and way too much sexual content and sensuality running through this book. I was like on maybe page 34 or 35 when I DNF'd it. That is a lot of sexual content for the opening pages of a novel. And you're switching between 2 points of view and dual timeline in those 34, 35 pages. And there was undoubtedly a lot of drama and tea about to be spilled, but really, I didn't need to read any further because the drama and the tea and the family, mess that was going to unfold just could not trump the completely gratuitous and unnecessary exposition on sexual behavior. And I'm just going to leave it there. One housekeeping thing. Felicity is going through a very bad allergy flare-up, so if you hear her cleaning herself, I apologize, but she is miserable, and she has been for most of the last week. Despite Benadryl and allergy meds and, hotspot spray, she is miserable. She has eaten a portion of the fur off of her tail, so I'm trying to keep her calm and inside and away from whatever is outside and bothering her. So, okay. So, what did I read? I completed 7 books this week. 1 audio, 2 physical, I'm losing track of something. And 1 audio, 2 physical, and 4 on Kindle. Okay, so let's do the audio first. And the first audiobook I listened to this week was What We Hide by Colleen Coble and Rick Acker. I should have DNF'd this book. I kept giving it another chance and another chance because this is my first Colleen Coble book that has been a flat out miss for me. And it has generally received very high reviews. And so I kept waiting for something to change for me. And well, yeah, that didn't happen. It really, really didn't happen. So why? I think when I scored this one on Storygraph, it was 2.75, maybe? Being generous? So our characters are Savannah and Hez. They are an estranged married couple who have suffered infant death in the fairly recent past. I say infant, more toddler than infant. And it is one of the single biggest stressors of any relationship. And as the book opens up, we discover that Savannah is filing divorce papers for the dissolution of her marriage to Hez, who she hasn't seen in 2 years, but she's also kind of sort of dating somebody at the same time before her marriage has been dissolved. And she stumbles across a dead body at her university. And of course, you stumble across the dead body, you're going to be considered a suspect. Hez just happens to be a lawyer, a defense lawyer at that. And she needs him to defend her. So she agrees to suspend the divorce proceedings so that there is no conflict of interest with Hez representing her against a potential murder charge. And thus the problems begin. So Hez, 2 years ago, before the story opens, was working from home. Savannah needed to run out and get some groceries or whatever. And she left Hez in charge of their 2-year-old toddler, whom Hez, parks in front of the television as she's watching her favorite show, and he tries to get some work done. And she has just recently learned to open the back door, and the unimaginable happens, and he is distracted. She gets bored when her television show ends. She opens the door and slips into the family pool and drowns. It is a tragedy. And unsurprisingly, it has emotional and marital consequences. And you quickly learn in the book that has spiraled out of control with alcohol and disappeared basically from Savannah's life for 2 years. And so she's had to come to terms, learn to support herself, carry on. And Hez has gotten himself sober and clean, and he wants his wife back, and he comes to talk to Savannah and gets served with divorce papers. And here's where the problems begin in this story. Savannah is an incredibly self-absorbed, emotionally immature woman who, while not physically cheating on her husband, is cheating on her husband with a potential boyfriend. She understandably blames Hez for the death of their daughter, but she has taken no affirmative steps to help Hez, reconcile with Hez, figure out if Hez has actually changed when he appears back in her life. And she takes no responsibility for the death of their child. And you're saying, Tammy, what? She wasn't even home. Yes, but in the course of the book, you learn that she knew Hez was a workaholic. She knew that when he was working from home, he got absorbed in what he was doing, and he didn't have the parental attention span to take a half hour, 45 minutes out of his work life to deal with his toddler while his wife was running an errand. She knew that and left him anyway. So she does bear responsibility, in my opinion. I'm not letting Hez off the hook by any stretch of the imagination. Do not get me wrong here. But she bears responsibility too. It takes two parents. Two parents are responsible for the child at all times. End of discussion. And through the course of the book, the anniversary of their daughter's death occurs, and Savannah goes to the cemetery and spends the day with her daughter. And then she gets upset because Hez didn't call her and Hez didn't show up. And she has all this unresolved anger and resentment and just angst at Hez. And she never, at one point, she questions why Hez didn't invite her to go to the cemetery to remember their daughter on the day of her death. She never stops to think, well, why didn't I invite Hez to go with me? It's our daughter. It's our loss. We're her parents. She never takes responsibility for her own actions. And she never takes responsibility for her own emotional immaturity. And yet somehow, by the end of the book, these two people who don't actually talk have fallen back in love. I didn't buy it. I don't care. It was not believable. It was not romantic. My sympathies all lay with Hez. As someone who has gone through something similar, but different, I understand both of their viewpoints when it comes to being angry at the universe and angry at God and railing against the unimaginable and the suffering you're going through. And Hez's response to that anger was to self-medicate. And Savannah's response was just to blame Hez. She doesn't even actually blame God. When we suffered our first miscarriage and every miscarriage thereafter, I clung to Dave like a lifeline. I was, and he was too, and he clung to me. This isn't a. He was the rock that got me up every morning, and he was the reason I could eventually begin to move forward, because I was so angry at God for a very long time that it took a couple of years. I'm not going to lie. It took a couple of years to get to the point where I could even think about prayer, let alone trying to figure out why. I can't imagine it would be faster if you lost a toddler versus an unborn child. I didn't find anything about this book believable. The twist ending I saw coming. There's going to be another book. I will not be picking it up. I don't care. It was very much not a Colleen Coble book. It just, nothing about this worked. There were so many red flags for Savannah in this book. She just ignored them all and just, no. Do not recommend this book. Colleen is normally a very safe choice for me, and this was just not a safe choice in the slightest. Do not recommend this book. Okay, so then I started the first book in the Dive Team Investigation series by Lynn H. Blackburn, which is Beneath the Surface, and I started it on audio. Don't. The audio is very bad. I wasn't engaged in the audio. I had it in my ears, but I wasn't, it was more background noise than it was Tammy's engaged in the story. The narrator is incredibly monotone. Her voice is incredibly wrong for the setting and the characters, and there was not a southern accent to be held. And at one point there is an explosion and she goes boom, crash, explosion. Really? That's how you're going to convey that? So I switched to reading it, and it's a much different experience if you read the book versus the audio. So I switched somewhere around, let's say 35-40% to not listening, and it got better. However, it's not my favorite. It was better than the Colleen Coble. It was far superior to the Dani Pettrey, but she is a Mary Sue. The protagonist in this book is a Mary Sue. I certainly didn't buy the romance in the slightest. And the ending was a case of, let's tell the reader, not show the reader. So the book opens up and there's a murder in the first chapter. Okay, we all know I do not do that. so that should have been my clue to DNF it, but I know how much Jeanette loves this book. She's given it 5 stars every time she's read it. So I pressed on. And I'm not upset that I read it. But between the murder in the first chapter, the telling and not showing at the conclusion, the Mary Sue protagonist, and an unbelievable love story, no. So our main protagonist is Leah, and she is a nurse in Carrington, North Carolina. And at least I believe it's North Carolina. And she has returned home to work in the local hospital after a stalking incident. And all of a sudden it appears like she's being stalked again. And she lives right down the road from where the dead body appears in chapter 1. And, she ends up getting involved in the investigation because she has a boat that the dive team can use to recover the body. Turns out the lead investigator for the dive team is the boy she had a crush on from high school on. He was always the one. And she's a definite I can do everything Mary Sue kind of character. So it's pretty clear from the get-go of the book that she's in danger. The investigative team sort of moves into her house to carry on the investigation. She's at one point kidnapped, and she self-rescues because of yoga. She doesn't get hit by the flying bullets. And the investigation team is not brilliant. They make all kinds of assumptions. And it wasn't horrible. It was my first Blackburn book. I will probably read the second book, or I may just skip to her Secret Service trilogy to see if that one's better. But nothing in this book was compelling. Yes, reading it was better than the narration by far, but it still wasn't enough to keep me fully engaged. I didn't hate it by the end, but also I don't like Mary Sue characters. I don't like when authors tell me and not show me the ending. And there were certainly not enough clues for the justify the ending that there was. So, yeah, not my favorite of the week. Okay, next up, I grabbed the remaining books from the Coastal Guardian series off of my shelf. Book 1 is on a shelf in another room. I will be unhauling this entire set. I do not think I'm picking up another Dani Pettrey book. So book 2 is The Crushing Depths. And book 3 is The Deadly Shallows. And I should have DNF'd these. I should have DNF'd these. They are... They were just bad. I don't know how else to describe them. They were just bad. I know Jeanette loves them. This isn't a reflection on Jeanette or Jeanette's taste. They did not work for me. They may very well work for somebody else. But for me, they didn't work. So in book 2, we are following Reese and Mason. And you learn very early on that Mason is new to the team, and he and Reese knew each other when they are children. And they're paired together to go investigate a death at an offshore natural gas drilling platform. And here's where my problems begin. And this is equally true for the third book. It was true for the first, which if I can find that review quickly when I post this, I will link down below. The author dives right in. There is no character backstories. There is no setting the scene. There is no I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. There is no depth. It is very surface level and shallow and cursory. It's cursory. So as the book opens up, you get hints that, not hints, it's pretty blatant. Reese has been in love with Mason for most of her life, and Mason has feelings for her too. And then it comes out, but it's never fully explained. It's never fully fleshed out that they were in a children's home together and it was an abusive situation, and Mason ages out and Reese runs away as soon as he ages out, and their lives are separated for 10 years. Why include that detail and then not flush out that backstory? You already put it out there, so why didn't you flush it out? I mean, seriously. And, they met when they were 6 and 10, 6 and 8, 6 and 8. So, they fell in love as kids or whatever, and somehow they're still in love at 26 and 28. What? Huh? They say I love you within a week of him coming back on the team. I'm sorry, what? I didn't believe it. I didn't care. I didn't find it romantic. I didn't find it suspenseful. I found it incredibly irritating. And then we get to the mystery or the suspense, and there were so many red herrings, and there was so little actual investigation. I mean, we have a murder on the platform. They're going to the platform and their helicopter crashes and someone dies. And then there's another murder on the platform. There's a fist fight. There's a blackout. There's a tropical storm. There's a platform-wide case of food poisoning. It's just too much going on. And that's not even taking into account everything that's going on land. And then you get to the faith. Now, I don't recall the faith from the first book, but I will tell you that the faith, the same characters appear in all 3 books, by the way. The faith in this book is different than the faith in this book from the mouth of the same character. I'm sorry, what? So somehow in the time span between these 2 books, he expresses his faith completely differently? No. And then there's this disturbing passage. Lucas is the suspect they're interviewing. And so I'm going to read you the passage. Lewis backed down as Mason anticipated he would. Lucas was rash and impulsive, qualities he possessed before coming to Christ himself. It didn't necessarily indicate Lucas was as edgy as he appeared, but he was hiding something. Mason could feel it. The question was what? Okay, so this sentiment appears more than once in the book, that upon accepting Christ, all of life's problems disappear, and you're suddenly this idealized, perfect, life is never a struggle person. And I'm sorry, that is not Christian. God does not expect us to be perfect. He knows that we are imperfect. He knows that we are creatures of sin. He knows that we are born in sin and that we will sin throughout our lifetime. And being a child of God does not make one perfect. It does not erase all of the struggles and complexities and challenges of being human. And that passage just set my teeth on edge. I really wanted to throw the book across the room. But I finished it. They got together, set up the romances for book 3, and I was so over it. But I had blindly purchased the series, and I was gonna finish it so I could unhaul them off of my shelves. So I immediately picked up The Deadly Shallows. This is book 3, and this is just under 400 pages. Yeah, it's just under 400 pages. I do not say this lightly. This is the worst one of the 3. So, this one opens up with a mass shooting at a Coast Guard graduation ceremony. And hang on. And we have one of our main characters, whose prayer life has changed from book 2 to book 3, by the way. He gets shot in the process of attempting to apprehend the mass shooters. We have one of the main love interest in this book. She is a Coast Guard medic, and she transports one of the shooters who survived, and she then becomes a target of the remaining members. So our male protagonist, Noah, who gets shot, this is his second in the same leg. The first one was a femoral artery bullet wound, and that has only healed to 75%. The bullet wound he received in this book in the same leg just missed his femoral artery. And in the first 2 days of this book, he reopens that wound 3 times and is returned to active duty to solve the case, which he manages to do in a week. Mind you, in that same week, our female protagonist gets kidnapped and rescues herself. She is tortured and then rescues herself from the kidnapping situation. They fly to Florida. She gets kidnapped again in Leavenworth. It's just one messy situation after another with these two. So we go from a mass shooting to a torture kidnap situation to a prison break in Leavenworth that kills many, many people. And that's not talking about the subplot of a toxic chemical spill and the subplot romance. There was just way too much going on in this book. No depth of characters. I don't care about a single person in this story. I don't care about their romances. I didn't find them believable. I found the faith to be overdone, not realistic, not faithful in my opinion, and just, I'm not going to pick up another book by Dani Pettrey. I understand a lot of people like her. She is not for me. These were very shallow, unlikable, surface level characters that did nothing for my reading experience and did not enjoy them in the slightest. I didn't. I am unhauling the series and I am not sad about it. So, what did I read next? Okay, one thing I forgot to mention about Dani Pettrey's books, and it really irked me in this one in particular, too much of the story happens off page. At one point, they are interviewing a potential witness, suspect, relative, and they fly to Florida to meet him. You see them meet him. And then next thing you know, they're talking about how great that interview was and how much information he, gave them to help them with the case. You're like, wait, what? Where? None of that occurred on page. How do I know what was said? You just told me what happened. You couldn't be bothered to show me. That is just a giant no for me. No. All right, so let's talk about Carolyn Astfalk first. And this was a full-length novel and the follow-up novella. The novel is Stay With Me. The novella is Come Back to Me. I love how the covers coordinate. I think they're beautiful in their own rights. This is Catholic contemporary romance, and it is fantastic. I have no other words for it. It is fantastic in and of itself. So, in Stay With Me are, her name just flew out of my head. Hang on, I gotta go find her name. Okay, her name is Rebecca, and his name is Chris. And these are young adult contemporary romance, by the way. That may not be fair. Let's call them new adult. They're in their mid-20s. So you have their ages. And the book opens up, and Rebecca has her toddler niece and nephew. She is trying to get them, some yogurt and stuff at the grocery store. The kids are tired. She's flustered. And she meets Chris in the yogurt aisle. He's restocking the shelves. And they each think each other is cute. But Rebecca has incredibly low self-esteem and doesn't think any man is going to want her. And she checks out, and Chris rushes after her in the parking lot to help put her groceries away, and they exchange numbers. So we have a great meet cute, and we get to know the characters really quickly. It's very obvious that there is something, I don't want to say off about Rebecca, but there's something just a little off kilter. And we quickly figure out what is off kilter. Her dad is a very, hang on. He's a very non-denominational fundamentalist who is so strict it's bordering on abusive with his daughters. And Rebecca has recently moved out of his house, but she has taken all of that emotional baggage with her. And she has a failed engagement in which, she internalized all of the abuse that was heaped on her. She has a very shaky foundation with God in which she goes to church with her dad to keep her dad peaceful. Chris comes from a stable, loving nuclear family. He is the only member of his family who believes. He's a recent convert to Catholicism. His best friend is a priest. And he's obviously clearly the stable one in the relationship. They go out a couple of times. They have a great date. They both feel the chemistry, but it's quickly apparent to Chris that Rebecca has some issues. Like, she's easily startled. She's very timid and scared and afraid of touch. And she doesn't open up. So for their third date, they go to the wedding of Chris's only sibling, and they have a great time, and they share their first kiss, and it was on the dance floor. It's the first time she's ever danced, and it was your typical Catholic wedding. If you've been to one, you know. And it was an electric kiss that just kind of stopped everybody in their tracks. It wasn't intentional, it wasn't planned, but it happened. And at that point, they realized, hey, wait, we have something special here. And they begin to date, and as the book happens, there's time jumps, and the whole story takes place over the course of a year. And Chris never pressures her to, So they go fairly early in their relationship. They go on an overnight camping trip to the Shenandoah Mountains. Nothing happens. And as they're leaving, he planned to go to a non-denominational service with her, but something happens and they can only make Catholic service in town, so they go to Catholic church. And she is understandably lost, like I think any Protestant would be when you know nothing and you walk into a Catholic service, and it's at all not like it was portrayed by her father and her church members. She's surprised that, scripture is not like mentioned once, it's mentioned multiple times. And the architecture is stunning for her, and It's a very typical Protestant reaction when they have been taught that Catholics are cultists and Catholics worship Mary and we don't know the Bible and all the things. And, there's no pressure. Chris is not in any way applying pressure. He explains if she has a question and she asks him, but he is not actively in proselytizing mode. It's just, I'm going to church. Would you like to go with me? Her dad finds out, and out comes all the anti-Catholic lingo you've heard in your life. Papist, the whole 9 yards. He's clearly opposed. He forbids his daughter from ever seeing him again. And she defies her father. There is enough of a spark that she defies her father, and she continues to pursue her relationship with Chris. And this slowly becomes not just a falling in love story, as two people find each other and mature together and start to build a life together. This becomes you've never pressured me to join your faith or your religion, but by the example in which you live, I want to know more. And she borrows books from his personal library that are Catholic, and she reads them, and then she borrows more, and she asks questions, and she eventually converts. Not because of pressure, and not because, it's what he wanted of her, but because of the example Chris lives. And this is just a beautiful love story between two people that life wouldn't have predicted would fall in love. It is outside my usual comfort zone. I don't generally, Fireball's gonna be mouthy, hang on. I don't generally enjoy at this stage of my life stories about 20-year-olds falling in love. These were two 20-year-olds, 20-somethings falling in love, making sacrifices for one another, choosing each other, choosing God, and living their faith. Not preaching it, living it, life by example. And it is just a beautiful love story. It was so moving to me that I immediately picked up the novella, which is Come Back to Me. And this is the novella of Chris's older brother, Alan, and his wife, Jamie, who we see get married in the first book. And in this novella, Jamie throws Alan out of the house. Alan then goes to live with Chris and Rebecca, who are by now married, pregnant, and willingly take Alan in. And you see Jamie and Alan not talking. There is very little communication between them. But over the course of 6-8 months, you see Alan's life fall apart. He almost make a very unwise choice. You see Jamie learn that some stuff she believed from her past isn't true, and that maybe she needs to not just throw her husband out, but actually sit down and have a conversation with him and see if they can find peace together. Neither Jamie or Alan in this book are religious. And as the novella concludes, they are in church with Rebecca and Chris and their nephew, and they both realize that maybe this sense of home that has filled them while they were in church has meaning. And it is just a beautiful novella about what it takes to fight for your marriage and learning from the example of those around you and growing up and realizing that being an adult doesn't mean indulging in your every whim. It means you make sacrifices for those you love and the things that you want together as a couple, and the choices you make are important. And there is something to the example your little brother and his wife are setting, and you could learn something. It was beautiful. I am extremely comfortable recommending this book to anyone. Now, do I think non-Catholics are going to pick this book up, read it, and enjoy it? The honest answer is no. I wish they would. I wish they would give Catholic fiction a chance. But I realize that isn't going to happen. So, if you are Catholic, or if you have an open mind and you're a Protestant, I highly recommend this book. I highly recommend Carolyn as an author. I have another one of her books on my Kindle. I cannot wait to read it. I don't know if it'll be this week. It most likely will not be this month. It'll probably maybe be next. These were moving stories about people in an age bracket I generally try not to read anymore. And I am so glad I didn't read them. She does have a couple of teenage romances. I'm definitely not going to read those. No offense to Carolyn, but they're just way too young for me. However, I am absolutely comfortable if you have Catholic teenagers in that age bracket, send them to Carolyn. I am comfortable with that without reading the books. These were they were fantastic, and I cannot wait to read more from her. My next one by her is, hang on, pull up the title. All in Good Time. And I know in that one the protagonists are older, so I'm very much looking forward to it. Okay. Oh, I should say, Carolyn's books are both have received the Catholic Writers Guild seal of approval. What is the last book I read this week? That would be Love in the Eternal City by Rebecca W. Martin. I pre-ordered this. That's right. I pre-ordered a book on my Kindle. I have never done that before. I enjoyed this book so much, I'm going to be upfront. I am going to buy a physical copy to put on my shelf. Yeah. Who am I and what am I doing? This is the first book in the Swiss Guard romance series. It is the first adult novel by Rebecca W. Martin. It is published by Chrism Press. And this is, this was released last week, by the way. This is fabulous. It is a rom-com. There is suspense. There is love. It is set in Rome. So after a failed, very messy breakup in which she has to get a restraining order, she loses her job, Alina is starting a new life in Rome. She has accepted a temporary assignment with Catholic Charity in Rome to be their communications director. And off she goes. And she very quickly meets Benedict, who is a Swiss guard, and his younger sister. And the banter, the Catholicism, the faith, the romance, the setting, the just absolute charm, the suspense, all of it was fantastic. And in the end, she thanks Emma St. Clair in her author's note. And it was beautiful. And I loved the cover. I think the cover is gorgeous. But I wasn't prepared for how much I was going to love this book. This is another mid to late 20s protagonist book. And surprisingly, they were far more mature. This book was just, it was everything. And I was so pleasantly surprised. I was so beautifully, pleasantly surprised. There is prayer throughout. There is... I don't normally highlight in my Kindle. I highlight so rarely that I am comfortable saying I never highlight. And I have highlighted a lot. Hang on. So I want to share a couple of highlights because I think they're absolutely beautiful. Crying is like rain from heaven, so our hearts can grow. But right now, that thought burns the back of my throat. It struck me. Heaven knows I need to pray. My relationship with God went up in flames, along with the rest of my life. This is probably one of my favorite ones from the entire book. Just disappeared. There it is. Comparison is the thief of joy. We all fall in that comparison trap. We all succumb to it. I don't care how much confidence you have. I don't care how secure you are in your marriage, your faith, your job. We all fall into the comparison trap. And it steals our joy. And it isn't what we're supposed to do. And I just thought that line was beautiful. I just thought it was beautiful. And this is one of the priests talking to Benedict. You don't want to be the perfect soldier, Benny. You want to be the best son, husband, and father, as every man does. Even the Pope, who is a son, a spouse, and father to the church. You just don't know yet what that looks like in God's plan for you. But it starts with forgiveness. Remember too, my son, that as hatred festers, you must let forgiveness reside in you, so that it may cleanse the hatred. There were so many moments in this book that were just profound and beautiful. I will read the next one in this series whenever it comes out. I will pre-order it gladly, not without any hesitation. She has several other published books. A couple of them are children's books. She has a couple of nonfiction, which are geared for parents. However, this book was fantastic. The banter. Y'all, the banter in here is superb. We have characters that are complex. Elena has body issues. She has incredible self-doubt because of the way her previous relationship ended. She struggles with depression. She struggles with, at one point in the book, scrupulosity, which is running to confession every time you think you have committed a sin, to the point where all you're doing is confessing, which is discussed in the book. And then we have Benedict, who has daddy issues, as he himself says. He doesn't know what he wants to do with his life after his term in the Swiss Guard is complete. He doesn't know if he wants to extend it, if that's even a possibility. What is he going to do? And they struggle with this, but they struggle with it together. And over the course of the novel, which, takes place 6-8 months, it isn't a love at first sight kind of meeting at all. You see them work through their issues together. You see them talk things out and say, we need to figure this out. They meet each other's parents. They build a relationship with each other, with their families, with God. And you see these people, you see them overcome their individual struggles. You see them overcome their ability to form a life together, especially since, Elena comes from America and she's a, Wisconsin farm girl, and Benedict comes from an incredibly wealthy family in Switzerland. What does that look like in the future? They have to tackle that. All of this occurs in this amazingly beautiful novel. And I'm going to buy it and put it on my shelves. Y'all, it was so good. And the thing I really love about Elena's book and the two from Carolyn is that every chapter had a title. It wasn't just a number, it had a title. I cannot tell you how much I appreciated the titles. The titles related to the chapters, they're related to the content. It all flowed beautifully together, and it was just delightful. I have no other word for it. It was delightful. And filled with faith and filled with love and family, and the combining of two lives that were complex and very different from one another, but that they're gonna make it off page because they talk to each other. They work things out together. They discuss what their future is going to look like before they just, assume that the other one is okay with that. And why did my light just go out? So I highly recommend Love in the Eternal City. Like, I cannot recommend this book enough. And if you're going to read one book from everything I read this week, I would say Love in the Eternal City is the most approachable. It has great banter. It has suspense in it. It has everything you want in a book. And the faith is stellar. It's absolutely stellar. So I did start London this week. Did I read as much as I told myself I was going to read? No, I did not. Will I pick it up this week? Yes, I will. I need to put a big old chunk in this. Probably need to read about 500 pages this week. Ugh. That sounds so daunting, and yet I read well over 500 pages yesterday, so that's no big deal. And did I pick up Words of Radiance? No, I did not. So, maybe I'll get 500 pages of that read this week too. She says yet again, I can do 500 in each of these this week. That's not an issue. I'm going to have to make that a priority because I need to get those done this month. And the month is rapidly running out of space. Okay. That is pretty much all. I did forget to put one book in the Prime Day haul, so I'm going to talk about it now. It just fits with everything that I read this week. And I purchased for myself, I've taken it out of the box, a new copy of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. This is published by Ascension Press. The box is beautiful, by the way. The box is gorgeous. It's high quality. And it is color-coded in correspondence with the rest of the stuff published by Ascension. So it isn't going to be a color coordination that you are unfamiliar with. The page quality is nice and thick and excellent. It is easy to read. There's plenty of room in the marginalia for notes, should you need to take them. It has, and this I particularly love, multiple ribbon markers. And I am as pleased as punch. So, that was my reading week last week. I need to focus on the big old books in front of me this week. I have a video game release this week. I need to keep Felicity as calm as possible all week. Probably need to go give her another allergy bath and a Benadryl here. What did you read last week? Was it a good reading week for you? Let me know in the comments down below. Like and subscribe. And I will see you here next time at the Protagonist Pub.